Welcome. I am so glad you are here with me today on English Heritale. Picture the oldest photograph you have ever seen of someone in your family. A grandparent, a great-grandparent. A face looking back at you from across decades, the clothes slightly strange, the expression serious, but the eyes the same. The eyes of someone you came from, someone whose blood runs in your body right now. Now ask yourself this. What if that photograph had never been taken? What if that face had simply disappeared into time, like every face before it, leaving nothing behind? Today, we are going to tell the story of the invention that made sure that never happened again. The story of the camera. And it is stranger and more extraordinary than you might think. So, find a comfortable place, take a slow breath, and let the story begin. The question that started everything was this: can light draw a picture by itself? Human beings had noticed something strange for a very long time. If you make a small hole in the wall of a dark room, the light that comes through that hole will project an image of the outside world onto the opposite wall. Upside down, reversed, but real. A moving, breathing, living image of whatever is outside, painted by light alone onto the dark interior surface. The Arabs called this device the camera obscura. In Latin, it means dark room, and scholars and artists had been using it for centuries, before anyone thought to ask the next question. The question that would change everything. What if we could make that image stay? For centuries, the camera obscura was used as a drawing tool. Artists would set it up, trace the projected image with a pencil, and use the result as the foundation of a painting. It gave them perfect perspective, accurate proportions, a faithful record of the scene in front of them. Vermeer used it. Canaletto used it. Some of the most celebrated painters in European history used this device of light and dark to help them see the world more clearly. But the image never stayed. The moment you moved the light source, the image disappeared. It was beautiful, and it was temporary, and it was not enough. And then, in the early 1800s, people began to find the answer. The first person to permanently capture a photographic image was a French inventor named Joseph Nicephore Niepce. He was not a young man chasing fame. He was a middle-aged tinkerer who had spent years experimenting with light-sensitive materials in the countryside of Burgundy. He coated a pewter plate with a substance that hardened when exposed to light. He placed this plate inside a camera obscura and pointed it out of his upstairs window. And then he waited. He waited for 8 hours. The sun moved across the sky during those 8 hours, illuminating both sides of the courtyard below. But the image appeared. A blurry, ghostly, barely there image of rooftops and a courtyard, captured on a pewter plate in the summer of 1826, the oldest surviving photograph in the world. Niepce called his process heliography, sunwriting, light writing its own picture onto a surface, prepared to receive it. But 8 hours was not practical, and Niepce knew it. He needed a partner. He found one in a theatrical designer named Louis Daguerre, who had been working on similar experiments through a different route. The two men formed a partnership. They shared their discoveries, they wrote letters, they argued, they pushed each other forward. And then, Niepce died in 1833. And Daguerre kept working alone. In 1839, Daguerre announced something that stopped Europe in its tracks. He had developed a process that could capture a detailed permanent photographic image in minutes rather than hours. He called it the daguerreotype. The French government bought the rights and announced it as a gift to the world, free for anyone to use. The announcement caused a sensation. A German magazine wrote that the news had struck like a thunderbolt. The painter Paul Delaroche, seeing his first daguerreotype, reportedly said that from this day painting is dead. It was not dead, but everything had changed. The early daguerreotype had one problem. Each image was unique. You could not make copies. Each plate was a single, original, delicate, and irreproducible. The solution came from an Englishman named William Henry Fox Talbot, who had been developing his own photographic process entirely independently. Talbot invented the negative. A paper negative from which any number of positive prints could be made. This was the fundamental breakthrough that would define photography for the next 150 years. One negative, infinite copies. The photograph as a reproducible object, something that could be shared and sent across the world. The world understood immediately what this meant. By the 1850s, photography studios had opened in every major city in the Western world. Ordinary people who had never dreamed of owning a portrait of themselves were suddenly able to sit before a camera and have their face recorded for the first time. For the wealthy, portraits had always been available. Oil paintings, miniatures, drawings. But for the working man and the working woman, this was something entirely new. To be seen, to be preserved, to leave some record that you had existed. Soldiers carried photographs of their families to war. Families kept photographs of soldiers who did not come home. Photographs of Abraham Lincoln are credited by some historians with helping him win the presidency, making his honest, plain face familiar to voters across a vast country. And then, the camera began to move. In the 1880s, a young American entrepreneur named George Eastman changed photography forever. First, he replaced the heavy glass plates that cameras used with flexible celluloid film. Lighter, cheaper, practical for ordinary people. Then, in 1888, he introduced a small handheld camera called the Kodak, simple enough for anyone to use. The slogan said everything. You press the button, we do the rest. For the first time, ordinary people could take photographs themselves, without a studio, without a professional, without any technical knowledge at all. Photography left the studio and entered everyday life, and the images that followed changed the world. Jacob Riis used a camera to photograph the tenements of New York, and his photographs forced middle-class Americans to see a reality they had been able to ignore. Dorothea Lange photographed the faces of families displaced by the Great Depression, and one image, a mother with 3 children in a migrant camp in California, became one of the most recognized photographs in history. The camera had become something no one had planned for, a witness, a conscience, a way of showing people what they needed to see and did not want to look at. Wars were photographed, famines were photographed, the first steps on the moon were photographed, the falling of the Berlin Wall was photographed. Every turning point in modern history has its image, and that image lives longer and reaches further than any written account of the same event. And then the camera became digital. Then it became a phone. Then it became something every human being on Earth carried in their pocket every moment of every day. Today, more photographs are taken every 2 minutes than were taken in the entire 19th century. The camera that Niepce waited 8 hours to produce one blurry image with is now a device that captures 1,000 sharp images before breakfast. And yet, something of that original question remains. Can light draw a picture by itself? It can, and it does. Every time you raise your phone and press a button, light is drawing a picture, writing itself onto a sensor, preserving a moment that would otherwise be gone forever. And here, my friends, is where I want to sit with you for one quiet moment. The camera was invented because someone refused to accept that a beautiful image had to disappear, that a moment seen could not also be a moment saved. Niepce asked what if, and kept asking until the answer appeared on a pewter plate after 8 long hours of waiting. That patience, that refusal to accept the temporary when the permanent was possible, that is one of the most human things there is. And it is not so different from what you are doing right now. You are listening to a story in a language that is not yet fully yours. Some words disappear as soon as you hear them. Some sentences blur like that first photograph, but you keep listening. You keep coming back, and slowly, the image develops. Slowly, the language becomes clearer. One word at a time, one story at a time, you are building something permanent out of something that once felt impossibly temporary. That is your photograph developing in the dark, and it is more beautiful than you know. Thank you for being here with me today on English Heritale. Leave a comment and tell me which part of the camera's story surprised you the most. share it with someone who is also learning English, and come back for the next story, because there is always another story waiting, and I will be here waiting with it.